Alright, so let's take a look at this stripped down remote control car. If we're going to build a robot with the Microbit, we need some sort of base to put the robot on, which in this case is just the body of this remote control car. We need the Microbit, we need a motor controller, and we need the motors and wheels on the car that we're going to control with the Microbit powered through the motor controller. So there's a couple things that we should do to prepare before we even start. Whether it's a remote control car like this one or any other platform with motors and wheels on it, the first thing we need to do is identify the wires from the battery, because we're going to need to have some sort of battery pack. And on this car, the battery pack is on the bottom here, and it slides right out, so that's pretty handy. So we need to be able to figure out how to connect to the battery, and in our case that's these two wires right here. And then we need to determine which wires go to which motor, and we need to pair those wires together. So I've already done that, but I wanted to show you how to do that, and there's a couple ways to do it. One is, if you have an electric meter, you can put it on the ohm setting and measure the electrical resistance. If I just measure the resistance across the leads, I get 0.8 ohms. And now as I start to grab these wires, notice if I grab a wire from one motor and I grab a wire from another motor, I just get the 1 there on the screen, which means that the infinite, no, I don't know. Yeah, I wouldn't say infinite resistance, but somewhere along those lines. But if I happen to grab two wires that go to the same motor, then I read, you know, a small but very real resistance. So in this case, 1.7 ohms. So because I read a small resistance, that means that I'm reading the resistance of the motor, and these two wires go together to power the motor. And you'll notice if I measure the resistance on these other two wires, I get 1.6 ohms. So I'm reading the resistance in the motor, and those two wires go together. I recommend taping the pairs together so you don't get them mixed up. Another thing you can do is you can take the battery wires, if you don't have a meter, and you can start, you know, just hold a battery wire to one of the wires that controls the motor, and then pick another wire and we should see like a motor twitch. So there we saw that motor start going. So that's another way to know that those sets of wires control one of the motors. So either way, we need to find out what wires are going to go to the battery and what wires go to the motors, so we know how to hook this up. Usually I like to hook up some sort of power light and even a power switch. On this particular robot, I'm just going to take out the batteries when I don't want power on. But I noticed this robot has two little LEDs here, and here's the wires for those LEDs. An LED needs a resistor to go through it, but what I'm going to do next is I'm going to just wire, I'm going to wire up this little LED, and then that way whenever the battery pack's on, this LED's on, and I'll know either I'm using my robot or I should take the battery pack out so I don't accidentally leave power on and drain the batteries. So that's the first thing I'll do. I will hook up this LED to this resistor and wire it up so I have a power light. And then after that, I'm going to show you how to wire the motor controller to the Microbit and to the robot. And pretty quickly, we're going to have a working robot ready to go here. All right, so here we go with wiring up this LED circuit. So I already I loosened one of these screws, and I kind of wrapped the resistor on here. I'm going to make this side of the resistor a little shorter, just so I don't have extra wire flopping around. And I will just kind of wrap this wire around here. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to get out my soldering iron, and I'm going to go ahead and solder this wire in place. And you can just wrap wires together maybe put a little electrical tape on it, and that'll work fine. But when possible, I like to just solder my wires together, because that way I know that they're not going to come loose, and things won't, if this gets banged around and stuff, it's nice to know that everything's just really well secured. So so I've connected that together. To connect the power wire side of this, I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to loosen up this screw on the battery case. I'll get it, try not to take it out all the way, because that might cause problems. But I'm just going to get it loose, and I'm going to wrap the wires around the screw post. And then I'll re-tighten this down. All right, and there we go. I have a power light on because the battery pack's in place. And what I'm going to do is, instead of a power light, I'm just going to keep the batteries out of the robot when I'm not using it. The next thing I want to do to kind of get this thing all prepared is I'm going to get a hot glue gun out. First I'm going to solder this, and then I'm going to hot glue this resistor sort of out of the way here. And I want to put a little dab of hot glue on the wires connected to my my battery post here, because I know from experience these will get moved around when I'm working on the robot, and if they get bent back and forth too many times, they'll break off. So if I put a little dab of hot glue on here, it'll provide some stress relief, and it will keep those from moving. And then I'll solder this and put a little dab of hot glue on there also. So I'm going to do that right now. Alright, so I've been letting my soldering iron heat up, and I've got a little piece of sponge here that I made damp. Alright, there we go. So I have my soldering iron heated up. I've got a damp sponge. I'm just going to put a little solder on there and then wipe it off with the damp sponge. And my soldering iron tip's gotten a little dirty. Chances are what I did here was at some point I was using it and kind of left it on for longer than I should have. And the way to clean it is just to kind of keep putting solder on it and then wipe it off. And as it gets clean, it'll get kind of shiny. So it's clean on most of it. This tip could use a little bit more attention, but it's good enough to work. So when you solder something, what you want to do is you want to get the things you're soldering hot. And so I'm kind of pushing on this against the wire. And then once the pieces are hot, introduce the solder to the hot metal. You're not just trying to put the solder on the tip of the soldering iron, because then it balls up instead of going where you want it to go. That is soldered now, and next I'm going to hot glue these things in place. Okay, so I have heated up my hot glue gun, and I'm just going to kind of hold, here's one of the battery wires. I'm going to kind of just hold it down right here, and I'm going to dab a little bit of hot glue Alright, so I'm going to hot glue these wires down, and I have to be careful not to get glue on these spots because they need to flex when I plug in the battery pack. So I'm just going to squish a little hot glue right here, kind of in this in-between area. I think that'll keep it from those wires wiggling around. And something I've learned is when I hot glue things, I have to really be patient and just kind of wait for the hot glue to dry. When I rush things, they tend to get kind of messed up. So I'm just going to wait. I'm going to let this hot glue dry. And then I'm also going to hot glue the this little resistor kind of out of the way. Okay, Okay, I'm going to do that right now. I'm just going to put a little teeny dab of hot glue right in here. And now I'll just hold this resistor up against the body of the robot, and I'll wait. Okay, there we go. Things are kind of stuck together. That should keep these wires from moving around. All right, so we've checked our motor wires and our battery wires. I provided a little stress relief here for the battery wires so they don't get bent around. And I've hot glued the resistor in place and wired up a little LED circuit, so when I plug in the battery pack, I'll get an LED turning on, let me know I have batteries plugged in. Next thing I need to do is connect the microbit to the motor controller, and then I'll plug in all these wires. All right. Okay, so there's one other thing I have to do before I'm ready to hook up motor controllers. I took one of the wheels off the one of the tires off the back wheels here. I left one of them on so you could see. It turns out with a bigger wheel, it makes a robot go faster, which takes more energy, more electrical current. And our motor controllers cannot handle the amount of current that this was initially intended to run on. So to make it so that our motor controllers can handle the load, what we're going to do is remove the tires from the back wheels, and that will slow the robot down and make it so it requires less power. So I'm just using these. You could get scissors or any number of things. These wheels are not easy to remove, but they're also not super hard to remove. So I just start by puncturing a hole and then just kind of nibble my way through the tire. Luckily it's not connected to the rim, so once I cut all the way through, I should be able to just pull this tire right off. Just when you get to the end, be careful that you don't nibble away at the hard plastic on the rim, because you don't want to like chip that or take a notch out of it. And almost there. Okay, so that tire came off. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to cut off the front wheels too, just because as this is trying to turn, I don't think it's going to want these knobby tires. It's going to provide some extra friction. So let's remove that also. So again, I'm going to start by giving myself a little hole and then see if I can start to nibble through this plastic. There we go. I got a bit of a connect to it. Okay, this front tire is almost off. There we go. One more front tire to go. this from the other direction too. Alright, there we go. Okay, so I've got the all the wheels off. I've inserted wired up my power light. Let me make sure that I can put the battery pack back in okay. Okay, just push in and turn it so the battery pack still goes in. Power light's on. I've figured out which wires are my power wires and which wires are my motor wires. And now I'm ready to start hooking up everything else.